My grandmother told me a scary bedtime story. Years later, I found out that the story she told me was horrifyingly true. I watched from a distance while my grandma and grandpa fished on their lake in the backyard. But one thing confused me. While grandpa cast his line and watched his rod, waiting for the anticipating tug of a fish, grandma's gaze remained fixed across the lake, her head tilted intently towards the dark fringe of woods. I never saw her look at the bobbing lures. She didn't even seem interested in fishing at all. I thought that maybe she just simply enjoyed looking at the trees. But a nagging feeling persisted. There was more to her gaze than a simple love for nature. It was summer break, and I decided to spend it at my grandparents' house in Knoxville, Tennessee. They lived in a two-story house, recently built in 2018. It connected directly to a lake, with a dock jutting out on the far right side where my grandpa kept his bass boat. My grandparents were a sweet and quiet couple. They kept to themselves most of the time, living a peaceful life in their little corner of the world. Every summer, though, my visits became a tradition. Grandma's invitation was always an automatic yes, her warm smile and gentle voice a beacon calling me back. There were countless things to love about my grandma, her kindness and generosity at the top of the list. If I wanted something, it was usually an automatic yes from her too. But one of the things I truly cherished most was her stories. Unlike Grandpa, who mostly stuck to tales of his time in the military, exciting stories filled with bravery and adventure, of course, Grandma was a bottomless well of stories. Whether it was a funny story from her childhood, a heartwarming story about a kind neighbor, or a fantastical bedtime story that transported me to magical lands, Grandma always had one on hand. She was one of those special grandmas who could weave a story from thin air, her words painting vivid pictures in my mind. Grandpa, on the other hand, was a man of few words. A quiet strength emanated from him, and the stories he did tell were always about his service. He'd talk about the places he'd been, the challenges he'd faced, and the lessons he'd learned. While not as fantastical as Grandma's stories, they held a different kind of magic, a testament to his resilience and the experiences that shaped him. One of the things I always admired about Grandpa was his outdoor skills. He'd tell me most of his knowledge came from his military training, jokingly saying they prepared him for anything. He was a true outdoorsman, the kind of person I'd trust implicitly if we were ever lost in the wilderness. He knew everything about fishing, the best spots on the lake, the best techniques to catch different types of fish. Some of my favorite memories were spent on his boat, cutting through the cool morning water, the sun rising over the horizon, and the gentle hum of the motor a comforting lullaby. Every night, Grandma dipped into her seemingly endless well of stories. I never quite understood how she did it. Her mind was like a sprawling library, shelves overflowing with tales to tell. One night, she'd spin a story of brave knights seeking vengeance, their swords gleaming in the sun. Another night, she'd describe a land shimmering with magic spells and cursed lands. Then, there were the scary stories. Now, Grandma usually avoided them. She knew how they affected me. But the thing about those scary stories was the detail. Oh man, the detail. They were so vivid, so real. It felt like I was peeking through a crack into another world. A world where the monsters and creatures she described lurked. A world so terrifying that I felt like falling through that crack would kill me. Every night was the same routine. Nestled under a patchwork quilt in the guest room, I'd wait with bated breath. The soft click of the doorknob was my cue. Grandma, her face etched with a lifetime of stories, would enter, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She'd pull up a rocking chair, its rhythmic creak adding to the lullaby effect. Then, in a warm voice, she'd begin telling me a story. One night, though, tucked under the patchwork quilt, I waited for Grandma's nightly visit. The soft click of the doorknob announced her arrival. "Ready for another story?" she asked, her voice a warm rumble. I nodded eagerly. Nights at Grandma's were journeys to magical lands, each tale more thrilling than the last. But tonight, I craved a different kind of story, a different kind of excitement. "Can you tell me a scary story tonight, Grandma?" I blurted out. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by a thoughtful pause. Unlike her usual repertoire of action-packed adventures, her stories had always steered clear of scary ones. She sat beside me on the patchwork quilt, her usual mischievous eyes replaced by a thoughtful gaze. Her eyes flickered toward the window for a moment before returning to me. Then, with a gentle smile, she began. "Those woods outside your window," she started, her voice soft. I instinctively glanced toward the window, the familiar silhouette of the trees outlined across the lake. "There's something in those woods," she continued, her voice dropping to a hush. A shiver danced down my spine, though the room remained pleasantly warm. Those words made me so uneasy that I almost told her to stop. But I couldn't. I was hooked. Grandma did tell me scary stories on rare occasions, but they were always fictional, utterly disconnected from the real world. She went on. "Every 7 years, it comes out of those woods. It emerges, A creature that's been on this earth for thousands of years. It crawls on all fours. It hunts, a silent predator searching for its prey. I began to tense up. The room was quiet, but the air felt heavy. Its body is like a man, but twisted and contorted, she murmured, and its limbs elongated, reaching out at odd angles. Its skin is black as coal, making it difficult to spot during the night. My throat felt dry, my eyes flicking back to the window. The trees, once comforting, now seemed darker. But the worst part, she continued, her voice barely more than a tremor, is its eyes. Multiple eyes, scattered across its head like a spider. They pierce the darkness, searching for an unsuspecting victim. She carried on, her tone low, sending shivers along my arms. Sometimes, if it has trouble finding prey, it ventures closer, closer to houses, searching for unlocked windows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The image of glowing eyes peeking through the glass made my skin crawl. If it finds an opening, she said, it will crawl inside and snatch the closest person to it, dragging them back to the woods. I clutched the blanket, knuckles white, cold sweat trickling down my temples. It keeps its victims alive for 7 long years, she whispered, feeding off them slowly until the hunger returns and it's time to hunt once more. My heart hammered as I stared at Grandma. She paused, then gave a small smile. But don't you worry, she said, her voice gentling. As long as we keep the windows locked, we'll be safe. And don't forget to do the same at your mom's house. She stood, her smile a bit strained, trying to be reassuring but not quite hiding the unease in her eyes. Her steps were slow and deliberate as she approached the window. I followed her every move with my eyes, fear pulsing through me. She stood there for a moment, gazing outside as though ensuring nothing waited in the darkness. Then she carefully checked the window lock. Right as she turned away, I blurted, "Grandma, have you ever seen it?" She paused. Something flickered in her eyes before she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Good night, darling," she whispered. Then, with a click, she left. That night, I barely slept, my eyes glued to the dark window, waiting for some monstrous face to appear. Eventually, I drifted off, but my dreams were haunted by that crawling creature. In them, I was trapped in an endless forest, branches scratching at my skin as I tried to escape. The creature lunged, dragging me by the ankles through the grass, the reek of damp earth filling my lungs. I'd jolt awake in a cold sweat, unable to forget those nightmares. Thankfully, the terror didn't linger forever. Over time, other stories replaced that chilling tale in my mind. Grandma continued weaving new adventures, and soon the memory faded. Though never entirely. It hovered at the edges of my thoughts, a dark whisper in quiet moments. A few years later, a cruel reality descended upon our family. Cancer took Grandma away, piece by piece. She fought hard, but in the end, nothing could stop the inevitable. Her passing left a huge gap in our lives, especially for Grandpa. The vibrant stories, the warm laughter, gone. Grandpa grew quieter, as though half of him had vanished. He lived alone in that house now, each room echoing with her absence. Sometimes, he said he was just waiting his turn. It was devastating to watch a once strong man fade under the weight of loss. Time pushed forward, dulling the edges of our grief, though never truly erasing it. Then, during my senior year in high school, something happened that forced me to recall Grandma's scary story in the woods. It was late. I came home after a long day and the house was empty. Mom was working a night shift. After finishing homework, I clicked off the TV, got into pajamas, and tried to sleep. But rest wouldn't come, my thoughts too busy churning. Then, around 3 a.m., a sharp tap broke the silence. My eyes snapped open to see a silhouette blocking most of the moonlight through my window. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but dread sank into my stomach the moment I spotted movement. A flicker of countless eyelids, opening and closing across a broad, night-black head. My mind screamed. The creature. The one Grandma described. A limb slithered toward the bottom of the window, reaching for the frame. Horror gripped me as I realized I hadn't locked it. I jumped out of bed, adrenaline roaring in my ears. I sprinted for the door, but it slammed shut with a force that knocked me back. Somehow, that impossibly elongated shape was now in my room, above the door. Its limbs, one pressed against the door, another angled grotesquely on the wall, kept me trapped. The head twisted around almost 180 degrees, a cluster of eyes all settling on me. Not a sound escaped its misshapen mouth. Next to me stood a wooden baseball bat. Seizing it, I lashed out. The impact made a dull thud, sending shards of wood flying. The creature jerked back slightly. No roar, no scream, just silence. It dropped to the floor, huge and contorted, and advanced again. I slammed the bat into it a second time. It recoiled, flailing. That split-second delay was enough. Heart thundering, I bolted out, hurtling down the stairs. My chest was tight with panic as I hit the living room, flicking on every light I could reach. The warm glow offered little comfort, but I raised the broken bat toward the stairs, prepared for it to emerge at any moment. Then the front door creaked open. My mom stepped inside, exhaustion on her face. She saw me trembling, clutching the splintered bat. "What on earth?" She never finished. A dark, impossibly long limb snaked out from behind the door, coiling around her waist. The creature pulled her outside so fast I barely saw it move. By the time I ran after them, she was screaming, clawing at its arm, already at the edge of the yard. I tripped and fell, face first into the grass. Darkness swallowed her screams as the creature vanished into the woods. The police arrived later, but what could I tell them? The truth sounded insane. Hours of interrogation followed, yet there was no physical evidence tying me to Mom's disappearance. The cops looked at me with suspicion, but eventually let me go. They launched a search, dogs combing the forest, neighbors volunteering to scour every hidden trail. Nothing came of it. She was gone. Dawn found me staring at my bedroom window, at the smudged glass. A hideous handprint clung there, a wide, splayed imprint with too many fingers. My blood turned cold. Grandma's story wasn't just a bedtime scare. It was real. But it didn't end there. The chaos of the police investigation and the fear gripping me at all hours meant I hadn't even called Grandpa yet. It was late morning when I finally gathered the courage to pick up my phone and dial his number. My hands shook as the phone rang. The search party was still combing the woods, but he deserved to know what happened. He answered on the third ring, his voice weary yet laced with concern. "Hello?" "Grandpa," I rasped. "Something took Mom right out of the house." Silence. When he finally spoke, I heard a tremble in his words. "I'll be there soon." I explained what I could when he arrived, though my story must have sounded insane. An impossible creature with spider-like eyes, dragging Mom away. Grandpa's gaze hardened. He told me Grandma once warned him about a legend tied to these woods, but he'd never believed it until now. He pulled out a small, time-worn notebook and handed it to me. She wrote all her stories here. Flipping through its pages, I found sketches and outlines of magical worlds, everyday anecdotes, and chilling tales of a monster emerging every 7 years to hunt. Grandma's words sent cold shivers through me, yet I couldn't stop reading. There was no clue on how to kill it or save its victims, only warnings. Lock your windows, never wander the woods at night. That night, Grandpa left the house armed with a hunting rifle and a flashlight, refusing to let me follow. He disappeared into the undergrowth. Hours later he called, whispering that he'd caught a glimpse of the creature in the treetops, vanishing without a sound. He'd found scraps of clothing, possibly Mom's. Then the line cut off. No one found any trace of Grandpa except for footprints and a dropped flashlight. Now Mom and Grandpa were both gone. The shock paralyzed me. The police, neighbors, and volunteers tried to help, but there was nothing to do. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. I finished high school in a daze of grief, then left Knoxville for college, hoping distance would dull the nightmares. It didn't. Sleep brought memories of that silent shape, of the last look on Mom's face as she was dragged away. I sometimes dreamt that Grandpa was calling my name from the woods, begging for help. I'd wake drenched in cold sweat. Years passed, and I tried to move on, but I held on to Grandma's notebook. One line in her shaky handwriting haunted me. "It keeps them alive for 7 years." Could they still be alive out there? Even now? When I couldn't stand it anymore, I returned to the abandoned house. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling. I stood on the old back porch, staring at the woods. At dusk, I swore I saw a shifting silhouette among the trees. Heart-hammering, I forced myself to walk closer. Broken branches and strange claw marks scored the trunks. The air smelled stale, rotten. A storm rolled in quickly. Thunder boomed, and a flash of lightning revealed a dark figure perched high on a branch. Multiple eyes blinked in eerie unison. Then it was gone. Rain pelted my face as I tried to follow, but I only got lost, slipping on wet leaves. I heard chittering noises all around me, as though the forest was alive with tiny whispers. Panic set in. Somehow, I found my way home and barricaded myself inside. All night I listened for movement outside the windows, but heard nothing over the howling wind. In the morning, I escaped that house, shaken and filled with renewed dread. Yet the faintest flicker of hope also stirred. If I had caught a glimpse of it, maybe there was a chance to stop it or find out where it kept its victims. I just didn't know how. 7 years after Mom's disappearance, I was awakened by a phone call from an unknown number. A broken, static-filled voice whispered, "I'm sorry." It sounded like Grandpa, but I couldn't be sure. Then, the line went dead. I asked myself if it was a cruel prank or a desperate attempt at contact. Fear and longing tightened my chest. I still live far from those woods, but I keep Grandma's notebook on my bedside table. Sometimes I study the final pages, wondering if there's a hidden clue. In the meantime, I keep my windows locked every night, and if that creature ever comes for me, I won't be caught off guard. I remember Grandma's warnings like a mantra. It hunts in silence. It crawls on all fours. It watches through the dark, and I remember the unwavering love she and Grandpa showed me. One day, I might gather the courage to return, properly equipped to search for them both. But until then, I can only share my story as proof that somewhere, out there, a silent terror creeps through the trees, waiting for the next time it hungers. It's not just a bedtime tale. It's real, and it's patient, and nothing, no locked window, no wall, can guarantee safety if it decides to hunt. I only hope that one day I'll be ready to face it head on. Despite everything, a piece of me refused to give up. Grandma's notebook mentioned older tales, stories about wards or protections, salt lines, iron nails, mirrored charms. I used to think they were just superstitions, but now I was desperate enough to try. I began researching archives in Knoxville, hunting for any mention of a spider-eyed creature. Old newspapers hinted at strange disappearances, sporadic but hauntingly similar to what happened to Mom and Grandpa. Different eras, different local legends, but always the same core horror. One night, I took iron nails, salt, and an old thrift store mirror to the empty house. I poured salt at every entrance, hammered nails into the porch threshold, and placed the mirror in the upstairs window. Storm clouds gathered overhead. As thunder shook the walls, I caught a glimpse of the creature's silhouette reflected in the mirror, a slender shape with too many eyes. Then, in a lightning flash, it was gone. In the morning, I found fresh claw marks near the porch. Maybe the wards had driven it back, or maybe it was just toying with me. Eventually, the mental strain overwhelmed me, and I left Knoxville again. But not without a plan. I scoured folklore for clues, metals that could wound supernatural beings, bright lights that might repel them. I gathered flares, high-lumen flashlights, iron-tipped arrows. In nightmares, I saw Mom and Grandpa trapped in some underground nest, eyes hollow, as the creature lurked nearby. Then, late one night at my apartment, my doorbell rang. I found only an envelope containing a faded photo of our lake house. A hunched shadow stood at the tree line. On the back, someone had scrawled, "Stop looking." Fear rattled me, but it also fueled my resolve. If I was on a path that frightened this thing, I had to keep going. I still don't know if Mom and Grandpa are alive, but I do know I can't abandon them. Maybe they're gone forever. Yet every day I feel Grandma's spirit urging me on. Someday, when I've gathered enough courage and knowledge, I'll return to those woods with everything I have. If there's a way to end this thing's hold on our family, I'll find it, or die trying. For now, I update this story so others know the danger is real. Lock your windows. Listen to the legends. Trust your instincts. Because somewhere out there, across the silent lake, or behind a line of ancient trees, it waits. And if you're not careful, it might just choose you next. But fate had more in store for me. Weeks after I returned from Knoxville, I started receiving strange phone calls in the dead of night. The line crackled, and a distant wind howled through the speaker, as though the caller stood deep in some hollow place. Occasionally, I heard what sounded like a faint voice, too distorted to make out. Each time, I answered with a trembling, "Hello?" only for the line to fall silent after a few seconds. The dreams worsened too. In them, I wandered through the forest at night, the ground a mass of tangled roots. Sometimes I saw Mom's shape slip between the trees, but whenever I hurried to catch her, she vanished. Other times, I spotted Grandpa's silhouette, standing stoic but distant, as though unsure whether he was still himself or part of the creature's domain. I always woke up with my heart pounding, calling out their names. Despite my fear, I refused to surrender to that silent darkness. I shared my story on small online forums dedicated to the paranormal, hoping someone might have encountered something similar. Many dismissed it as a fabricated horror tale, but a few reached out privately, saying they too had seen impossible shapes lurking in moonlit forests. Each account hinted at something ancient and predatory. I became obsessed with the idea that I might have to confront it head-on. I began training, running at dawn, practicing archery at a local range. Every arrow I loosed, I imagined piercing one of the creature's multiple eyes. With every breath, I told myself I was doing this to stand a chance against it, to push past the terror that had controlled my life. Grandma's notebook remained my most precious possession, her words echoing in my mind. Stay vigilant. The phone calls continued intermittently, a steady reminder of my fear. Sometimes I thought I heard static, choked whispers, but I could never confirm what they said. Was the creature mocking me, or was someone else trying to warn me? Finally, I resolved to return to Knoxville for a final confrontation in the old house. I'd stay a full week if I had to. I planned to bring everything: floodlights, iron-tipped arrows, a flare gun, and more nerve than I'd ever had before. If the creature appeared, I wouldn't run. I'd fight. And maybe, just maybe, I'd force it to reveal where it took my family. I haven't left yet. still summoning the courage. But it won't be much longer. I'm tired of living in the monster's shadow. If there's even a sliver of hope, a chance that Mom and Grandpa are still somewhere in that grim place, I have to act. So if you've read this far, remember my story. Lock your doors and windows. Listen for strange taps in the dead of night, because some horrors are real, and they are older than our fears can grasp. And if it chooses you, if you see those spider-like eyes glimmering through the glass, don't waste a second. Run, fight, do anything you must. The silent shape that emerges from the darkness has no mercy, and it never stops hunting.